Hello, welcome to those who haven't been here before. Welcome back to those who have watched before. Thanks for coming again. My name is Aaliyah Langley. As you can tell by the title of this video, this is the books I read in April 2024. Another one of these, basically my month of books installments. And let's not waste time. Let's jump right in. So the very first book I read in April 2024 was actually, I read most of it in March, and I was going to finish it on March 31st, but then I just didn't. And I essentially finished like the last third of it, really, on April 1st. So it is technically an April book, and that first book is Evicted by Matthew Desmond. Quick little synopsis on it. In Evicted, Princeton sociologist Matthew Desmond follows 8 families in Milwaukee as they struggle to keep a roof over their heads. Evicted transforms our understanding of poverty and economic exploitation while providing fresh ideas for solving one of 21st century America's most devastating problems. Its unforgettable scenes of hope and loss remind us of the centrality of home, without which nothing else is possible. Now, this book I was really excited to read this book. Excited may not be the right word. I was interested in reading this book. I had just read Poverty by America by Matthew Desmond a couple months prior, and I thought it was excellent. And there's a lot of the same themes in those books, but this was really just a focus on eviction. And again, like in the synopsis, it says in Milwaukee, but this is really one of those books where you can look at Milwaukee, but then you can really just like take it to other big cities in America. And it's one of those things, eviction and also poverty in general, which I really felt by Poverty by America, which if you want to hear my little synopsis on that, I believe I read that book in February. You can look at that video there. It's something that we know happens a lot, but also I didn't know like the scale of how much it happens, and also like how devastating it can be to some aspects. I often think about, sometimes they show things in movies of seeing people losing their homes, and you can see like how like it says like how central a home is, and how without a home sometimes so much can just fall apart. So this book was really just like just like opening my mind so much, and it really was just like incredible to see. Again, you take Milwaukee, but you can really probably take the same situation in Milwaukee and put it in any other big major city and really just be shocked. And also Milwaukee is dealing with a lot of like, racial divides and stuff like that. This really just makes it horrible for the citizens there. So kind of like I said, but my kind of review for it was, it's such an important book that puts a rugged spotlight on eviction and poverty. Like I said, it can be extrapolated to cities across the United States. And it really just really brings a lot of hard truths to this book, and like the reality of poverty is much more devastating than anybody who hasn't dealt with it can really imagine. And I just was this book was just excellent to me, just how Poverty by America was. And also in this book, and also in Poverty by America, I like how Matthew Desmond always ends with an action kind of thing, like a charge, saying, I'm not going to just dump all this information on you and say, all right, well, go back to your day, go back to your house and do whatever. Like he gives like points on how maybe we can eradicate this problem, and how we can go to the cities we live in, things like that, to try to like help people, and little things we can do to kind of, again, take action against problems like this happening to so many people in America, but also several other places. But I know it's a massive issue in America. So that's really what I always enjoy about this book. So it's the second book of his I read that he ends on a positive and say that, okay, take the information and go do something with it. I would definitely recommend Evicted and also Poverty by America by Matthew Desmond. Both two excellent books and some of my favorites of this year, definitely. The next book I have I should say, Evicted by America, I gave that a 5 out of 5. No surprise there. The next book I have is Hunger, A Memoir of My Body by Roxane Gay. Now, this book was a book, she also was the writer of Bad Feminist a couple years ago. I've heard of that book. I think that book kind of got pretty popular, but I kind of heard like Whispers of Hunger kind of around the same area that when Bad Feminist was kind of like, getting its kind of heyday. There was something I saw online, and someone criticizing someone's body or something like that, and someone saying, man, we really all need to read Hunger by Roxane Gay. And I remember I was like, oh yeah, that's that one author, I think. And I just kind of bookmarked the book, and it was available at my library, so I just kind of scooped it up and read it right away. Quick little synopsis here. From the New York Times bestselling author of Bad Feminist, a seemingly honest memoir of food, weight, self-image, and learning how to feed your hunger while taking care of yourself. Quote, I ate and ate and ate in the hopes that if I made myself big, my body would feel safe. My body would be safe. I buried the girl I was because she ran into all kinds of trouble. I tried to erase every memory of her, but she is still there, somewhere. I was trapped in my body, one that I barely recognized or understood, but at least I was safe. In her phenomenally popular essays and long-running Tumblr blog, Roxane Gay has written with intimacy and sensitivity about food and body, using her own emotional and psychological struggles as the means of exploring our shared anxieties over pleasure, consumption, appearance, and health. As a woman who describes her own body as wildly undisciplined, Roxane understands the tensions between desire and denial, between self-comfort and self-care. In Hunger, she explores her past, including the devastating act of violence that acted as the turning point in her young life, and brings readers along on her journey to understand and ultimately save herself. With bracing candor, vulnerability, and power that have made her one of the most admired writers of her generation, Roxane explores what it means to learn to take care of yourself, how to feed your hungers for delicious and satisfying food, a smaller and safer body, and a body that can love and be loved in a time when the bigger you are, the smaller your world becomes. Great little synopsis that. This book I thought was excellent. Right off the bat, I gave it 4 to 5 stars. Again, Roxane gave out something I really knew about or knew much about. I knew a little bit of kind of what this book was going to be about, but the book starts really with, she basically reveals her weight, her heaviest weight. She's basically she's being considered for like one of those weight loss surgeries, and they have to measure, you have to weigh you there, and she gives her weight. And in that, she says it, but then she also says, this is not a book about my overcoming my obesity and stuff like that. And also she makes a distinction saying, this is not a book about someone who's obese or like overweight. This is about someone who's morbidly obese. I forget the term, but she was saying like a person who was in this class, which is what she was in. And saying, this is not a story of me being triumphant over it or being able to figure out my thing. This is just me being honest about my body and what I've dealt with, what kind of got me to this point. And she goes through this journey of talking about how when she was young, she was sexually assaulted in such a violent way. And since that moment, she just started kind of in the synopsis there, she started just putting on weight, eating to protect herself, feeling like that would be the shield to kind of get people to not bother her in that way again. She goes off to boarding school, still struggling with her parents, don't really know what to do, and it's just this constant cycle that just continues to go, and that she still is dealing with. But it's such a vulnerable memoir. It's so real, so raw, so honest, and also just ultimately it's so brave, I feel like, to talk about these things. She was saying as well in her book, her parents didn't even know some of the things she was going to, like her assault when she was younger, until she like put it in some of her, she's an author now, obviously. They didn't know about these things until she was putting it in some of her work, and that kind of was able to enlighten the family about some of the things. And she always was kind of like the weird one in the family, because the family was like this really fit family and all these things, and then there was her, and people would often be surprised when they saw her when she'd come home and things like that. It's just really an excellent book. Reading, I really just felt gratitude that someone like that would be able to be so vulnerable and be able to share it and just be so open and just to release this book, which I think is such a powerful book, and it's one I definitely recommend for a lot of people as well, because I think it was just so honest and raw, and memoirs like that are really special. It's one of those books where it's like, it's kind of like a whole bunch of little text, like no more than like 3 pages at a maximum, but some of them are even like a page or so, and you kind of just flip through, and there's like 90 or so of them. I don't remember off the top of my head, but it's a really, really great book. Not too long. It's about, let me look, it's about 230 pages. I've had it on Kindle, and definitely recommend that one. It's a really great one. Again, 4 to 5 stars. The next book is a book I actually have still here with me. I haven't given it back to my library yet. It's Freedom is a Constant Struggle by Angela Y. Davis. Ferguson, Palestine, and the Foundations of a Movement. This book is a book that has been on my mind to read for a bit, but obviously came up again kind of in the past several months here. This book is so timely, as of now especially, but it was published in, I think, 2016, so it's been around. And if you know Angela Davis, she is always usually ahead of the curve on a lot of these things, but this book is excellent. Quick little synopsis here. In these newly collected essays, interviews, and speeches, world-renowned activist and scholar Angela Y. Davis illuminates the connections between struggles against state violence and oppression throughout history and around the world. Reflecting on the importance of Black feminism, intersectionality, and prison abolitionism for today's struggles, Davis discusses the legacies of previous liberation struggles, from the Black freedom movement to the South African anti-apartheid movement. She highlights connections and analyzes today's struggles against state terror from Ferguson to Palestine, facing of outrageous injustice, Davis challenges us to imagine and build the movement for human liberation, and in doing so, she reminds us that freedom is a constant struggle. I kept my little review of this on Goodreads awful short. I just said, excellent, timely, insightful, challenging, thought-provoking. Angela Davis is one of those people who's she's really a civil rights icon and a civil rights hero for many. And this was like a series of interviews, like either over email, speeches she gave, things like that kind of put together the things she was saying and the connections between Ferguson and Palestine, but also just like connections and so many other things and injustices we're seeing all over the world, and how we have to put those things together to really realize that we all are on the same side. At the end of the day, when you think about these things, if you're someone who was protesting in Ferguson and protesting, on behalf of Palestine, those things are really merged and they really are together, and she really connects those things together and shows how important it is and how the system does things to kind of, make those kind of holes that really mess people up and things like that, and how it's just like all these things are connected really, and it's really just one of those that puts it all together, put the pieces together. I give this a 4 out of 5. This book, excellent. Like I said, timely, thought-provoking. You finish reading it, you're really just like thinking about so many things. You want to flip through the pages again. It challenges you sometimes on things you're reading, things you're thinking about, like which, I feel like any book like this, you don't want to always read it and agree with everything that happens or is said. And sometimes you might, and that's fine, but sometimes it's good to read texts that are not always 100% aligned with you. That way you can kind of challenge yourself and open yourself up to new things. I did that kind of recently. Again, another book I read a couple months ago, that some of these topics are touched on here as well, about from prison abolition completely. Which is really, really great book. I would recommend this one as well. Again, a lot of good books this month. I usually pick a lot of good ones. Freedom is a Conscious Struggle. Read that book now more than ever, definitely. The fourth book we have is The Tradition by Jericho Brown. This is another one I still have in my possession because I haven't given it back to my library yet, but they renewed it for me, so shout out to them. The Tradition is one that I was picked. I have a book club, and this was one picked by one of our book club members. This book we read it for April was Poetry Month if you missed it. So that book, quick little synopsis there. Also, this book just won the Pulitzer, I think it won it 2021 or 2020, so a couple years ago, but still pretty awesome. Jericho Brown's daring new book, The Tradition, details the normalization of evil and its history at the intersection of the past and the personal. Brown's poetic concerns are both broad and intimate, and at their very core, a distillation of the incredibly human. What is safety? Who is this nation? Where does freedom truly lie? Brown makes mythical pastorals to question the terrors to which we've become accustomed, and to celebrate how we survive. Poems of fatherhood, legacy, blackness, queerness, worship, and trauma are propelled into stunning clarity by Brown's mastery and his invention of the duplex. A combination of the sonnet and ghazal and the blues, testament to his formal skill, The Tradition is a cutting and necessary collection, relentless in its quest for survival while revealing in the celebration of contradiction. I've never really been a poetry person. I gave this book a 4 out of 5. I've never been a poetry person, not really anyways. I don't know, it's never really been my thing. I've read poems now and then, but I really, really liked this book. I really, really liked this book of poetry. And I liked it even more so. I read it. It's not a long book. It's just under 100 pages. Then poems. It's not full pages, so it's pretty easy to get through. I read this the night before we had our book club meeting. So I read this on a Saturday night. We had the book club meeting on a Sunday early afternoon, and reading it again, not fully, but the person who was leading the book club that day had us basically pick our favorite poems from the book and read them aloud and discuss them, and also having people just talk about them. And in that discussion, hearing people read it aloud, also even me reading aloud some of the poems that I thought were my favorite, I connected to them even more in a way, and also I liked them even more, and it really had me they hit me more, stood out to me more, essentially. So I'm not sure if I need to do that more with poetry. Sometimes I feel like reading inside your own head sometimes isn't great with poetry. Maybe that's my disconnection with it. But like I said in the synopsis, this book covers a lot of topics: fatherhood, legacy, blackness, queerness, worship, and trauma. And they're all everything in here is written. I don't know. I feel like it's really just something that when you read it, you got to read it a couple times sometimes. Like I feel like I miss it. For me, I missed it on the first read. I still gave it a 4 out of 5 when I read it at first because something was there, but like it really kind of hit me again when I read it again. I didn't read it fully again, but I read a lot of it again, and also reading it aloud really had me like, oh wow, this is wow. And also Jericho Brown invented the duplex poem in this book as well, which, quick little say what that is. The duplex poem is within a single structure. The duplex is comprised of 14 lines arranged in couplets, wherein each line is between 9 and 11 syllables. The second line of the first couplet is echoed in the first line of the second couplet, and so on. And the first line of the poem is also its last. Again, I don't know a lot about poetry, but I remember my sister said that on the meeting, and said that he invented this the duplex poem and everything like that. And I was like, wow. And he has a couple the duplex poems. There's like 5 or 6 of them in here. This is one of them in the back. A really great book that I liked. Again, not a huge poetry person, but I really like this one. I'm pretty selective in poetry. I read it all, if any. So I'm happy that someone picked this on our book club, and that's why I was able to read it. Again, good, strong 4 out of 5 stars. Really, really great. The final book I have that I read in April 2024 is The Body Keeps the Score: Brain, Mind, and Body in the Healing of Trauma by Bessel van der Kolk. This book, 5 out of 5 stars, easily. Let me give you a quick synopsis. A pioneering researcher transforms her understanding of trauma and offers a bold new paradigm for healing. Trauma is a fact of life. Veterans and their families deal with the painful aftermath of combat. 1 in 5 Americans have been molested. 1 in 4 grew up with alcoholics. 1 in 3 couples have engaged in physical violence. Dr. Bessel van der Kolk, one of the world's foremost experts on trauma, has spent over 3 decades working with survivors. In The Body Keeps the Score, he uses recent scientific advances to show how trauma literally reshapes both body and brain, compromising sufferers' capacities for pleasure, engagement, self-control, and trust. He explores innovative treatments from neurofeedback and meditation to sports, trauma, and yoga that offer new paths to recovery by activating the brain's natural neuroplasticity. Based on Dr. van der Kolk's own research and that of other leading specialists, The Body Keeps the Score exposes the tremendous power of our relationship both to hurt and to heal, and offers new hope for reclaiming lives. This book was, like I said, 5 stars. I feel like trauma is something, if you haven't dealt with trauma, then that's one thing, but I feel like, again, trauma is a fact of life. Most people, either someone in your family or someone maybe in your close friends or circle in another kind of way, has dealt with trauma. I'm sure that someone, if you haven't personally, someone probably has in your circle that you have. Again, trauma is a fact of life, and reading this book, I immediately was kind of like alerted by the title, The Body Keeps the Score. I forget where I heard about it at first. I know my mom was recommended to my mom, one of my mom's friends who was a psychologist, and I heard about this book at some point, and I was interested in reading it. The title, and originally, The Body Keeps the Score, I was like, oh, this is interesting to see like how, what's happening here, and kind of like the little science nerd I have in me was interested to see in the book all the connections being made about like what happens when you're dealing with this, and like how fight or flight can happen, how certain things, how like your brain's not acting the right way when you had this history, and all these kind of things in there. But I felt though that this book was intelligent, thorough, incredibly compassionate, insightful, and potentially groundbreaking for clinicians or just people dealing with trauma, and maybe figuring out like what might work for them, hearing about methods that Dr. van der Kolk uses, and maybe bringing that to their own therapists or their own doctors, things like that, that really can just maybe like change their life in a way. We really are going through, again, all these decades that he's worked with doing research, trying to get like, the DSM manuals updated, sometimes losing in that struggle, just like the experience he's had with his patients. It's a tough read because hearing some of the stories are really tough. Anytime you kind of read a book like this, usually like a therapy book, it's, when you're hearing the stories, they're incredibly tough. But also, again, with the compassion, even some of his patients who have done horrible wrongs, like some of the veterans in particular that one of the early stories in the book is of a veteran from Vietnam, and we're hearing of his story, and it's like what? But he's coming from a place of such compassion, coming from a place of care, and it's excellent. He mentions someone in the book, Dr. Bruce Perry, who he wrote a book with Oprah a couple years ago called What Happened to You, and that kind of deals with trauma and things like that. That's another book. I saw that name and I was like, oh, Dr. Perry, another book that I would highly recommend if you have not read that. But this book, again, like I said, it's a tough read because it's just like it's tough stuff to cover, but it's one of those books that I would highly recommend to anybody, because even if you haven't dealt with trauma yourself, again, it's something that someone in your life probably has dealt with, and maybe this can be a book to help you kind of realize the connections between why is their body not responding in the way I might want them to, what are they still holding on to, things like that can really kind of hold someone back for life, because if their brain and body is disconnected or connected in a way to like hold them back still, it's really one of those things that can kind of help you see that, but also think about, again, if you're in the position or if you're a clinician, to maybe give you some ideas on how to treat people, because again, I will say it again, trauma is a fact of life. So many people deal with trauma, and it's something we're not going to really get away from, unfortunately. So books like this, I feel like, do a lot of good. So that is my list of books for April. 5 solid books. Again, I'm pretty selective with what I pick, but sometimes I just pick random things that have been on my list. But this was a crop of books this month that had all kind of been on my radar for a bit, to some degree, even if like they're way back in my mind that I totally forgot about them. But I got through them in this past April. Happy I read them. And we will be back again for another book talk in May. I already finished a book in May so far. I have that one that's on my bed, kind of by my bed, that I've put down for now because I'm reading another book. Our book club is next week, and I have to finish that one before I finish that one. So yeah, I will be back again next month for another recap of my books. Let me know if you're reading this month. What did you read last month? Comment those things below. I want to hear. I'm always open to recommendations, as I always say. I like to read a lot, so hit me with recommendations. Any kind of book. I usually will read pretty much anything. Not too crazy. Not too. Be selective. Send it to me, and we'll see what I think. But I'm always looking for recommendations, so put those below, and I will see you guys in my next video. Thanks so much for watching. See you guys.